I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 97. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter. Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode where we are digging in on the Focus Forward framework. Last week, I gave you a bit of an intro about the Focus Forward framework and that there's 3 parts to it. And every single person that I work with goes through the Focus Forward framework. That is how we work together. And I've always used it. Clients didn't necessarily know it, back when I was early starting the company, but now it's just what we do. You aim for something specific, you make a plan, and then you honor the plan, period. So we put it into a framework to make it easier and more digestible for law firm owners to be able to apply this to their own worlds and their own lives, their own firms. And so that's what we're digging into, this little mini series of episodes. There's 3. So last week we focused on aiming specifically for something and why that's so important. And I gave some tips about if you're a beginner and you're new to this and you don't really have that trust relationship with yourself on following through, then start small. And I gave some tips on how to be a beginner and how to think about aiming very specifically from a beginner's place. We talked about an intermediate level, what that could look like, and then an advanced level. Intermediate and advanced is what I am working with people who come to Velocity Work to work with us. In Mastery Group specifically, and in the sprints, the 30-day sprints that we offer. But Mastery Group, when I'm leading strategic planning retreats, if you're brand new, just baby new to all of this strategic planning and the growth that we talk about inside of Mastery Group, then I will encourage you to just pick a revenue goal for the year. That is as far as you need to go. And then I help them with what we'll be talking about today, reverse engineering, so that they can make sure that they have a plan, a strong plan to get to that goal. Now, if it's not their first rodeo within Velocity Work and they've done that before, they've picked a revenue goal, they've worked backwards, and now we're at another strategic planning retreat, then I'll push them to do a more advanced way of thinking about this, which is looking at their lifestyle that they want to create and really quantifying that as much as possible so that they can figure out, okay, what is it going to take in order for them to support that lifestyle? And it's more than just money, but I'll tell you something. And this is true. People get weird about setting goals around just revenue because it's more than about the money and all of that. I get all of that. I agree with all of that. But revenue is the measuring stick that if it's thought through well enough, and if you set that revenue goal for real reasons, not just for the sake of shooting for a big number, if you've thought through it for real reasons, then when you are reverse engineering from that goal, then you will be taking into consideration all of these elements that will help you achieve the lifestyle that you've said is what you want to achieve with that revenue. So it's important to have a revenue goal. There are sub goals that go underneath that. We're going to talk about that today with making a plan, but you have to pick a revenue goal. And I just want to say, and what I want to make clear is that the thing about aiming well is making sure that you know why you picked that number. There's no hard and fast rules with this. And I have zero judgment on people who are like, I don't know why I want to go for 3 million, but I'm going for 3 million. All right. I do. If they're working with me, we are for sure going to talk about what they think that's going to look like and why that's appealing to them and all of that, but they can still keep their number. It's not up to me to decide what numbers you should set. It's up to you. And that's why I like facilitating things in a really specific way so that you are very clear about what your motive is for the number that you pick. Some people just have a number in their brain and I'll dig into their motives for it. And that's fine. As long as they know their why, I'm good with that. Some people don't know the number, but they know the life that they want. And so we'll talk about that and we'll get specific and then we'll put a number to it for what that's going to take to support it. And then we'll see, okay, what does that mean the firm needs to do? So then we have a revenue goal for the firm. So it doesn't really matter. You just have to be conscious and awake about what you're aiming for and why you're aiming for it. And that's what we focus heavily on in AIM. When you aim specifically, you can line everything else up really well. Which leads me to today. Today, we're talking about the second part of the Focus Forward framework, which is planning, making a very strong plan, well thought out, deliberate, strategic plan to get to what you're aiming for. If you don't decide first what you're aiming for, you cannot make a strategic plan. So that's why AIM comes first. Now, when we're talking about planning, last week I broke down if you're a beginner, right, and intermediate and advanced. We'll think through these things in the same way. I said last week, if you're a beginner, start with something close to you that won't take you a huge amount of time to create that result for yourself. Name something specific. Maybe it's the completion of a specific project. Maybe it is a number goal, a certain number of clients that you want that month, or maybe revenue. It doesn't matter, but it just needs to be closer to you. That's going to stretch you, but you know you can create it. And you may not know exactly how long it's going to take, but you know it's not going to take an inordinate amount of time. So that's the best way to do it, is the beginner phase. Now, if you're a beginner and you did decide, you're listening to this podcast and you're like, yep, that's the way I'm going. Okay, so you have your project, so to speak. And that's the way I want you to think about it. It's a project. If you were to break down all the things that need to happen in order to get that project complete, that's how you should be thinking. So you want to get it all out of your head and onto paper or a whiteboard or a digital document, whatever. Get it all out of your head and just do a brain dump. And from there, you can, after you have it all out of your head, you think you've got all the steps down, then you can prioritize the steps. You can figure out what needs to happen first, second, third, to the best of your ability, all the way down. Once you prioritize them, you just want to make sure that each thing is broken into its smallest component. And, so basically you can look at the thing that's listed there and maybe it's delegate something to someone, right? Okay, well, what's the obstacles in the way of delegating that thing to that person? Whatever obstacles come up in your mind, well, I need to map this out. I need to give access to these accounts. I need to, whatever it is, those are your tasks. Those need to be taken into consideration because it'll help streamline how you spend your time and how you plan your time to get to that goal. So think down to the smallest component, and then you have to put in your calendar when you're going to get those things done. This is very important. People leave things on to-do lists and then it gets lost because their time is soaked up with everything else. Your calendar should be the boss of you. If you don't know about Monday Map, Friday Wrap, it is a process that I teach. You can go to velocitywork.com and get the free guide to teach you how to, as a law firm owner, plan your time extremely well. And it actually has nothing to do with law. So I say for law firm owners because those are my clients, but anyone could use this same advice. I'm just breaking it down with my clients in mind. So you can go to velocitywork.com and get Monday Map, Friday Wrap and get yourself going so that you increase your ability to plan your time well, so that when it gets to the third element of Focus Forward, which is honoring your plan, you can actually do so. Okay, so sticking with planning, you have to break the thing down into as small as pieces as possible, and then calendar. And the way I teach it in Monday Map is when you're doing it that close to you, you're breaking down all the tasks. You have to assign the amount of time next to each task or sub project, but assign the amount of time next to each thing, and then calendar based on the time you have set, and give some generous estimates. So you don't want to bloat it, but you also don't want to undercut yourself because that's not going to be possible to stick to. So just make sure you're giving a really fair amount of time to the best of your ability, and you write it down next to each item, and then you can calendar those things. Then next week we'll talk about, because there's a lot of ins and outs to think about, your job is to honor your plan at that point. Okay, so that's if you're a beginner. That's it. You just have to think backwards. What are all the things that need to happen? And I was doing that from a project. Let's just say you have a goal and it's a certain number of new clients coming in this month. Okay, what are all the things that are going to happen? What can you do to influence that? Because that goal, you don't have control over that number, but you have influence over the number. So what efforts are you going to put forth in order to create that result, in order to hit that number of new clients for the month or the quarter. Whatever you've picked, apply this to you. So then it's the same thing, because whatever efforts you said, those things now you have to treat those like projects. That is what you have to break down and map out, all the smallest components. And you put an amount of time next to each thing, and then you calendar those, because you're saying these things are my best guess on what's going to lead me to hit that number of clients. So you do have projects. It's just you didn't name the project as a goal like some people might. You actually named a number goal, which is totally fine. But then in order to make a good plan to get there, you have to think through, what am I going to do to get myself there? And what are the things I'm going to break down? What are the small steps of that? How much time is each one of these things going to take, to the best of my knowledge, with estimates, and then calendar. And then you're at the point where then it's time for the third piece of the focus forward framework, which is honoring the plan. So that's beginner. Now let's talk about intermediate, sort of the next level of this. Intermediate and advanced is what I work with people one-on-one with and facilitate in the groups. The beginner, I would say, is the sprints, right? Because it's just one result in that month you're going to create. So that's like a beginner way of doing it. Beginner, by the way, does not mean less than. It's just starting closer to you. It's very meaningful. It's very powerful. So don't get confused and think, well, I don't want to start with the beginner. I want to be the advanced. The advanced just means that you can stack the skills that you've acquired by doing the beginner stuff. You can start to stack those skills with intermediate and advanced. And when you have a coach, when you have a facilitator, it's a lot easier to navigate all of that. So that's why I really do focus mostly in Mastery Group and with my private clients on the intermediate and advanced stuff. So intermediate, when it comes to planning, I mentioned last week, if you're aiming at sort of an intermediate level, you're thinking about aiming specifically, I usually encourage people to pick a revenue goal that they want to create and hit in that year for their firm. It's okay that we're not starting with lifestyle first. You will get there. This is just an intermediate way to strengthen your skill set to aim, plan, and then honor your plan. So pick a revenue goal for the year that you are shooting for. Now, once you have that number, you have to make a plan. How are you going to get there? Well, it's important to always reverse engineer backwards from that. So when you think about that, how are you going to break down the quarters? What does that mean per quarter needs to happen in terms of revenue? And do you want to give each quarter equal weight, or are some quarters inevitably busier? And you always know that every year. So you're going to give more weight to that quarter than the others. So you have to decide, what does that mean for the quarter? So if you're starting right now, as this podcast goes live, you have 2 quarters left in the year. So if you have a revenue goal you want to hit, then naturally you need to subtract what you've already made, and what's left over, that's your gap. So the gap between where you are now and where you want to be, now your job is to make a plan to bridge that gap. And so you have 2 quarters to do it. Do you want to give equal weight? Do you want to give more weight to one quarter versus the other? And then just in the quarter closest to you, you break down what that means per month. And again, you can decide, are they all going to be even? Is one month going to be more, that you're going to really shoot for more in one month than another? So you think about how you want that to look. Once you have the revenue for each month, then I want you to think about, okay, if this quarter I want to hit that revenue, I've got it mapped out for the months. What do I need to do in order to make that a reality? What are the efforts I need to put forth in order to create that result? Now, if you're like, well, nothing, my firm's just growing on its own, so I'll probably hit that. Well, then why are you setting a goal? Like, if you know that that's what's going to happen, that's not a goal. A goal is something that you're stretching for that is attainable and realistic, but it's going to stretch you. So make sure that you feel that stretch, because that is going to create these high level ideas of efforts that you need to put forth. And sometimes it's just getting organized inside the firm, documenting systems and processes, because you know you need a better foundation if you're going to be able to hit that level of revenue, or when you hit that level of revenue. If you'll have these ideas, you will know for your firm and for yourself what you need to do in order to make the best push that you know how towards that goal. So you got your quarterly revenue, you broke it down by month. Some attorneys, based on their practice area, prefer to break it down by week. Totally up to you, but you break that down, you chunk it down. And then once you have the numbers, you have to say, okay, what now am I going to do to hit that? All right. So there's one more thing I'll have you think through. If you have a revenue goal and you're working backwards, how many new clients do you need to hit that revenue goal? That's like a sub goal of the revenue goal. So it's not two different goals. It's kind of one and the same. It's just saying, oh, I want to hit, 100 grand in this quarter. That means I'm going to need to likely have this many new clients signed up in this quarter in order to hit that. Then it's like a sub goal that you can focus on that will lead you to the revenue goal that you named. So I encourage you to think about, what are the sub goals that are going to give you that revenue goal? Think through that. So you'll have your revenue goal for the year. You have it for the quarters, but we're going to focus in now on the quarter closest to us. So now we have the quarterly goal, we have the monthly goals for revenue, and now we can set these sub goals. And then once you have those in place, then you can think about what are the efforts to make that happen. So if you want to hit 100 grand per quarter, I mean, for some of you, that's a lot. For some of you, that's hardly anything. I'm just throwing out a number, but you want to hit 100 grand for the quarter. And that means you need, let's say for your practice area, you need 20 new clients in this quarter in order to hit that goal. Okay, well, if I need 20 new clients, how am I going to get those through the door? What can I do to generate more new clients if that's a focus for you? And so then that's where your projects come in. I need to get this campaign started. I need to get my intake process nailed down. I need to hire a virtual receptionist. Like, what are the things that need to happen in order for you to get that done? Then those are your projects. And then, just like the beginners, you break down the projects to its smallest components, as small as the tasks as you can get it. You assign an amount of time next to each item to the best of your ability, and you calendar those things. Like when you're a beginner, it's very easy to see why I'm calendaring these things. So I'm spending time on my goal. It's very easy to translate, but I think it takes more experience the higher level you get with your goals, because there's more reverse engineering to do. And then when you get to the place where you're scheduling time in your calendar, you have to trust and remember throughout the quarter that this is what you need to do in order to be on track for the revenue goal that you had set, and for the new client goal you had set, which means you'll be on track for the revenue goal that you set. You have to remember, like when you think backwards like this and you get to the effort part, then your job is to get it in your calendar and you show up for your freaking calendar. And that is the honor the plan part, which is the third part of the focus forward framework, which we're going to go into next week. This is how well you have to plan. And, when I'm really working individually with someone, or even in my strategic planning groups that I lead in Mastery Group, we dig in to think through, is that possible? What work hours are you going to work? Does it fit in your work hours? Like, we talk through the nitty gritty, because that is what it takes. You have to think through, you have to take planning seriously, because if you create a plan that isn't actually possible, then you can't honor the plan, which is the next step. So in order to create a plan that's really doable for you in terms of effort and pace, then if you don't do that, then you're setting yourself up to fail. So this is the hard work, and it's discipline, and it's a skill that can be developed to plan very well, to plan in really thought out ways, so that it's actually a doable plan for you to hit the goals that you're aiming for. This is all very important. So I hope this helps. This is the planning section to reverse engineer and think backwards on things. If you want help with this, if you want more coaching and facilitation with all of this, come and join Mastery Group. Start there. If you want to level up and become a private client someday where we work on this stuff together, you can, but start with Mastery Group. Just get in there. It's an awesome community of people that are all focused around the same stuff. They're focusing forward. They are aiming, they're making a plan, and they're honoring their plans. So I hope you enjoyed part 2 of digging in a little bit more to planning and how important it is to take planning seriously. I went through beginner and what it looks like when the goal is closer to you, what you're aiming for is closer to you. Intermediate, which is when the goal is further out, and then advanced, which I didn't go into a ton here. The only difference is that you have a lot more to reverse engineer from because of, just like we talked about last week, you're aiming further out. So it's a different level of planning to think backwards. Listen, even for me, I teach this stuff and it's really helpful for me to have facilitation and guidance as I'm thinking backwards from my longer term goals. So it doesn't mean something's wrong with you if you need that. We're human. It really helps to have some navigation provided to you for all of that. So with the planning phase, if you're beginner, you have less to plan for because it's closer to you. If you're intermediate, you have a little more to plan for because it's a little further out, but it's still reverse engineering and you still get yourself back to what's the effort in front of you. And if you're advanced, it's the same thing, but it's even further out and you have to reverse engineer harder. You have to reverse engineer from a broader timeline. So there's a lot more to work backwards from to get yourself to figure out, okay, in this quarter, this is what I have to focus on. These are the goals then for this quarter that put me on track for really where I ultimately want to be. And then what are the efforts that it's going to take to get me to hit those quarterly goals? So it doesn't really matter what you're shooting for and how far you're shooting out. With the planning phase, you have to reverse engineer well enough and smart enough to think about what is it going to take to bridge the gap between where I am right now and the end of this quarter. And there are goals I need to hit. Yes, that's like what you're aiming for in the quarter. But then there's efforts I need to put forth that are different than what I'm doing now. I have to operate differently. What do I need to get done? How do I need to show up? What needs to happen in terms of effort this quarter? And you break all that down and you put it in your calendar. All right, everybody. Sometimes it seems so simple. I get off the podcast. I'm like, is this good enough? But you guys, you can't make it more complex than this. And you can't let your brains get confused when you're reverse engineering. You have to stick with this framework. You're aiming for something specific. You're going to reverse engineer to make a really strong plan to get there. And you focus on what's in front of you, the quarter in front of you. And then your job is to honor your plan, which we're going to go into next week. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your week. I will see you here next Tuesday with the third phase of the Focus Forward framework, which is honoring your plan. Hey there. If you enjoyed this podcast, I highly recommend you come and check out Mastery Group. It is where owner attorneys come together to study this material, apply it, and thus create really big results for their firm and for their life. So come on over, velocitywork.com/join to get more information and get started. Show notes from this episode can be found at velocitywork.com/podcast.